The stagecoach door slammed shut behind her like a coffin lid. Clara Whitmore stood in the dust, one hand pressed against her swollen belly, the other clutching a worn carpetbag that held everything she owned. Around her, the frontier town of Redemption Falls went silent. Women pulled their children close. Men turned their backs. Someone spat into the dirt. She was unmarried, visibly pregnant, and completely alone, a scandal in human form. But when Clara lifted her chin and met their cold stares with blazing defiance, something shifted in the air. This woman wasn't here to beg forgiveness. She was here to survive. If you want to see how far Clara's fight takes her, stay until the end. Drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The October wind cut through Redemption Falls like a knife through cheap fabric, carrying with it the smell of wood smoke, horse manure, and judgment. Clara Whitmore stepped down from the stagecoach with as much dignity as she could muster, though her legs trembled and her back ached from 3 days of rattling across unforgiving terrain. The driver didn't help her down. He didn't even look at her. He just tossed her bag into the street and cracked his whip, sending the horses lurching forward before she'd fully cleared the step. She stumbled but didn't fall. That would come later, she thought darkly. Right now, falling wasn't an option. The town spread before her like a judgment rendered in wood and stone. False-fronted buildings lined a main street churned to mud by recent rain. A general store, a saloon, a church with a crooked steeple. Beyond them, scattered houses and the vast, indifferent Montana sky. It was smaller than she'd imagined, meaner, more closed in on itself despite the endless horizon. And everyone was staring. Clara's hand moved instinctively to her belly, 7 months swollen beneath her traveling dress. She'd let out the seams twice already, but the fabric still pulled tight, announcing her condition to anyone with eyes. Her condition, her shame, her future. A woman in a gray dress and white apron stood outside the general store, one hand frozen on the door handle. 2 men on the saloon steps stopped mid-conversation. A boy leading a mule halted in the middle of the street, mouth hanging open until his father cuffed him on the ear and dragged him away. "Move along, Daniel," the father muttered, loud enough for Clara to hear. "Ain't nothing there for decent folk to see." The words landed like stones. Clara felt each one, adding to the weight she already carried. But she didn't lower her gaze. She'd made that mistake before. Back in Philadelphia, when the whispers started, when doors began closing, when James's family made it clear that their son's indiscretion would not be legitimized by marriage to a seamstress's daughter, regardless of consequences. The stagecoach had been her last resort, paid for with money she'd saved for a wedding that never came. The ticket agent had looked at her belly, then at her ringless finger, and quoted a price 3 times the normal fare. She'd paid it. What choice did she have? And now here she stood, in a town she'd chosen because it was as far as her money would take her, a place where no one knew her name, her history, her shame. Except shame, she was learning, traveled well. It needed no introduction. Clara picked up her bag and started walking. She had the name of a boarding house, Mrs. Hartley's, scrawled on a piece of paper tucked in her sleeve. The stagecoach driver had mentioned it when she'd asked about lodging, his tone making it clear he thought she'd be better off sleeping in the livery stable. The boarding house sat at the far end of town, a 2-story structure that had once been painted white, but now wore its age in peeling strips and weathered wood. A hand-lettered sign hung from the porch. Rooms available, respectable tenants only. Clara climbed the steps, each one creaking under her weight. She knocked, waited, knocked again. The door opened 6 inches. A gray-haired woman with spectacles and a mouth like a dried prune peered through the gap. Her eyes went immediately to Clara's belly. "We're full," she said, already pushing the door closed. "Please." Clara wedged her foot in the gap. "I can pay. I'm a hard worker. I can sew, clean, cook. I said we're full." The woman's voice could have frozen whiskey. "And even if we weren't, I run a respectable house. I won't have your sort bringing scandal under my roof." "My sort?" Clara's voice rose despite herself. "You don't know anything about me." "I know enough." The woman's eyes flickered to Clara's hand, ringless, then back to her face. "Try the saloon. That's where women like you usually end up, anyway." The door slammed shut. Clara stood there, hand still raised to knock, feeling something crack inside her chest. Not break, not yet, but crack. A fissure in the wall she'd built to get this far. She turned back to the street. 3 more boarding houses, according to the driver. She tried them all. The second door opened wide enough for a thin-faced man to look her up and down like livestock. "Can't help you, miss. Wife wouldn't stand for it." The third didn't open at all, though Clara heard footsteps on the other side and saw the curtain twitch. The fourth belonged to a widow named Mrs. Carson, who at least had the decency to look uncomfortable when she refused. "I'm sorry, dear, truly, but I have a daughter of marriageable age. Having someone like you under the same roof, people would talk. You understand." Clara understood perfectly. She understood that there was no room for her here, no room anywhere. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of copper and blood. Clara walked back toward the center of town, each step heavier than the last. Her back ached. Her feet throbbed. The baby kicked, a flutter of movement that felt like accusation. What had she been thinking? That she could simply arrive in a strange town, pregnant and alone, and build a new life? That distance would erase scandal? That the frontier offered second chances to women who'd made first mistakes? She sank onto a bench outside the general store, setting her bag beside her. Through the window, she could see the woman in the gray dress watching her, lips moving in what was surely gossip to another customer. Clara closed her eyes. The sound of hoofbeats made her look up. A man was riding into town on a roan gelding, tall in the saddle with shoulders that spoke of hard work and long days. He wore a simple cotton shirt, worn trousers, and a hat pulled low against the dying sun. There was dust on his boots and something careful in the way he moved. Economical, deliberate, nothing wasted. He tied his horse outside the general store and started toward the door, then stopped. His gaze had fallen on Clara. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. His eyes were gray, she noticed, clear and direct, not judging exactly but assessing, taking measure. "Evening," he said finally. His voice was low, roughened by wind and disuse. "Evening," Claire replied, lifting her chin. He nodded once and went inside. Through the window, Clara watched him gather supplies, flour, coffee, sugar. The woman in gray leaned across the counter to whisper something. The man's expression didn't change, but he turned his head slightly, glancing back through the window at Clara. Then he said something short that made the woman straighten up and press her lips together. He paid, collected his supplies, and came back outside. Clara expected him to mount his horse and leave. Instead, he set his parcels in his saddlebag and turned to face her. "You looking for work?" he asked. The question was so unexpected that Clara almost laughed. "I'm looking for a place to sleep," she said. "Work would be secondary to not freezing to death. Ranch hand quit last week, left me short with winter coming." He spoke in the same economical way he moved. "Room and board plus wages, works hard. Hours are long. But the bunkhouse is warm and the food's decent." Clara stared at him. "You're offering me work? If you can work?" His eyes flicked to her belly. "Can you?" "I can work." The words came out fierce. "I'm stronger than I look." "Didn't say you looked weak." He adjusted his hat. "Name's Cole Bennett. Ranch is 5 miles west. Be there at dawn if you want the job." "Just like that?" Clara heard the suspicion in her own voice. "You don't know anything about me, why I'm here, why I'm—" She gestured at her obvious condition. "None of my business," Cole said. "What is my business is whether you'll show up on time and do the work. Will you?" Clara stood, picking up her bag. Every instinct screamed caution. She knew nothing about this man. He could be anyone, want anything. But what choice did she have? Sleep in the street, beg at the church doors, go back to Philadelphia and throw herself on James's family's mercy, assuming they had any? "I'll be there," she said. "Where? You can ride out with me now," Cole interrupted, "unless you've got someplace else to be." She didn't. They both knew it. Cole tied her bag behind his saddle and helped her mount. His hand on her elbow was brief and impersonal, but it was the first kind touch Clara had felt in months. She had to blink hard against the sudden sting in her eyes. They rode out of Redemption Falls in silence, the town watching them go with 100 pairs of judging eyes. Clara didn't look back. There was nothing there for her anyway. The Bennett Ranch appeared as the last light drained from the sky, a cluster of buildings huddled against the vast emptiness of the Montana plains. A main house, small but solid. A barn, larger than the house. Several outbuildings and corrals. Everything spoke of function over form, necessity over comfort. Cole dismounted and helped Clara down. Bunkhouse is there. He pointed to a low structure with a chimney. It's rough, but it's clean. There's a pump out back for water. I'll bring you some supplies for tonight. Breakfast is at 5. 5, Clara repeated faintly. Ranch doesn't run on city hours. There might have been humor in his voice, but it was hard to tell in the gathering dark. Get some rest. You'll need it. He started toward the main house, then paused. I meant what I said. This is about work, nothing else. You do your job, I'll do mine. We'll get along fine. Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. She watched him disappear into the house before she turned to the bunkhouse. Inside it was sparse but blessedly warm. A stove in the corner radiated heat. 4 narrow beds lined the walls, all empty. A table, 2 chairs, a shelf with a few battered books. Clara chose the bed farthest from the door and sat down slowly, feeling every mile she'd traveled. True to his word, Cole returned with supplies. A blanket, a pillow, a basket with bread, cheese, and apples. He set them on the table without ceremony. There's 2 other hands, he said. They're out checking the north fence line, won't be back till tomorrow. When they return, he paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. They'll have opinions. Ignore them. I'm the one who pays wages, and I say you're hired. After he left, Clara lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling. The baby kicked again, stronger this time. She put her hand over the movement. I don't know what I'm doing, she whispered to the child. I don't know if this will work, but it's what we've got. Outside, the wind picked up, howling across the empty plains. Inside, the stove crackled. Clara pulled the blanket around her shoulders and closed her eyes. Tomorrow would come whether she was ready or not. It always did. Dawn broke cold and clear. Clara woke to the sound of a bell clanging somewhere outside. The call to breakfast, she assumed. She rose stiffly, her body protesting the hard mattress and the journey that still ached in her bones. She'd slept in her dress, having nothing else suitable, and now she did her best to smooth the wrinkles and make herself presentable. The main house kitchen was warm and full of light. Cole stood at the stove, flipping flapjacks with practiced efficiency. A pot of coffee steamed on the back burner. Sit, he said, nodding toward a table already set with plates and utensils. Clara sat, feeling oddly formal. In Philadelphia, she'd eaten in kitchens before. She'd been a seamstress, not wealthy. But this felt different, more intimate somehow. Cole set a plate in front of her. Flapjacks, bacon, eggs, more food than she'd seen in weeks. Her stomach growled audibly. Eat, Cole said, sitting down across from her with his own plate. Work starts in 20 minutes. They ate in silence. Clara tried to pace herself, to eat like a lady, but hunger won over propriety. The food was simple but good, and there was plenty of it. You said you could work, Cole said finally, pushing his empty plate aside. What can you do? Clara swallowed her last bite. I can sew, mend clothes, make new ones. I can cook, not fancy, but filling, clean. Keep books if you need it. I worked in a dress shop for 3 years. Before that, I helped my mother with her boarding house. Cole nodded slowly. Can you handle livestock? I've never tried. You'll learn. Can you fix fence? Again, never tried. You'll learn that too. He stood, collecting the plates. Winter's coming. We need to bring the cattle down from the high pasture, repair the barn roof, stock the root cellar, and about 100 other things. Some of it's heavy work. If you can't manage something, you tell me. I don't need you hurting yourself or the baby trying to prove a point. Understood? Clara stood as well. Understood. But I'll do everything I can. I'm not afraid of hard work. Good. Cole handed her a coat from a peg by the door. Worn canvas, too large but warm. You'll need this. Come on. The ranch in daylight was bigger than she'd realized. Beyond the main buildings, the land rolled away in gentle swells of brown grass and scattered pine. Cattle dotted the landscape. Not a huge herd, but substantial. In the distance, mountains rose purple against the sky. Cole walked her through the ranch, pointing out each building and its purpose. The barn held horses, tools, and hay. The chicken coop needed cleaning. That would be her first task. The root cellar was half empty and needed stocking. The fences, he explained, were in constant need of repair. "Two hands work here regular," Cole said as they walked. "Tommy's been with me 3 years. Good worker, keeps to himself. Red's newer, only been here since spring. He's got opinions, like I said. Don't let him rattle you." "I won't." Cole glanced at her, something that might have been approval in his gray eyes. "No, I don't expect you will." The chicken coop was exactly as unpleasant as Clara expected. Filthy, smelling of ammonia, and worse. But she'd cleaned worse in her mother's boarding house. She tied a cloth over her nose and mouth and set to work, mucking out old straw, scrubbing roosts, collecting eggs. The work was hard. Within an hour, her back ached and her hands were blistered. But there was something almost meditative about it, something cleansing. Each forkful of dirty straw removed felt like shedding the weight of the past weeks. Here, no one was whispering. No one was judging. There was only work, simple and honest. At noon, Cole brought her water and bread. "You're doing good," he said. "But pace yourself. I need you for the long term, not just today." Clara wiped sweat from her forehead. "I'm fine." "You're stubborn." But there was no criticism in it. By evening, the coop was clean and the chickens were contentedly pecking at fresh grain. Clara stood back, admiring her work despite the exhaustion dragging at her limbs. It wasn't much, just a clean chicken coop. But it was hers. She'd done it. She was washing up at the pump when she heard horses approaching. 2 riders came into view, silhouetted against the setting sun. The ranch hands, Clara realized. Her stomach tightened. They dismounted near the barn. One was young, barely 20, with sandy hair and a nervous energy. The other was older, built thick through the shoulders, with red hair going gray and a face that looked like it had met a few fists in its time. Cole walked out to meet them. Clara couldn't hear the conversation, but she saw the younger one, Tommy, she guessed, glance her way with curiosity. The red-haired one's reaction was more pronounced. He stiffened, said something sharp. Cole's response was brief and final. The red-haired man, red obviously, shook his head and stalked toward the bunkhouse. Tommy followed more slowly, giving Clara a small, uncertain nod as he passed. Cole walked over to where Clara stood. "Told you Red would have opinions?" "What did he say?" "Nothing worth repeating." Cole's jaw was tight. "You let me handle Red. You just do your work." But as Clara headed back to the bunkhouse for the night, she could feel Red's eyes on her, hot and hostile. She'd faced worse, she told herself. She'd survived Philadelphia, survived the journey west, survived being turned away from every door in Redemption Falls. She could survive this too. The days fell into a rhythm, hard and unrelenting. Clara woke before dawn, ate breakfast with Cole in the main house, while Red and Tommy ate in the bunkhouse, and worked until dark. Her hands, soft from years of needlework, toughened into calluses. Her back grew stronger. The baby continued to grow inside her, making everything harder, but not impossible. Cole was true to his word. He gave her work suited to her condition, mending harnesses, organizing the tack room, preserving vegetables from the garden for winter storage. But he didn't coddle her. When she said she could handle something, he took her at her word and let her try. Tommy was friendly in a shy, awkward way. He'd tip his hat when they passed, offer to carry heavy things, ask if she needed help. Clara appreciated it, but kept her distance. Getting too friendly with any of them felt dangerous, like inviting questions she didn't want to answer. Red was another story. He made his contempt clear in 100 small ways, turning his back when she entered a room, spitting in the dirt when she passed, making comments just loud enough for her to hear. "Whore's gonna make this place soft," she heard him mutter to Tommy one morning. "Boss has gone simple in the head bringing her kind here." Tommy mumbled something Clara couldn't hear. Red's response was clearer. "Just wait. Women like that, they're nothing but trouble. You'll see." Clara kept her head down and kept working. She'd learned long ago that responding to such talk only made it worse. Men like Red wanted a reaction. Denying them one was the best revenge. But one evening, about 2 weeks after her arrival, Red pushed too far. Clara was crossing the yard carrying a bucket of water from the pump. Her belly had grown heavier, throwing off her balance. She didn't see the rock until she tripped over it, the bucket flying from her hands as she fell hard onto her hands and knees. The impact knocked the wind from her lungs. For a terrible moment she couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Pain shot through her belly, sharp and terrifying. "You all right?" Tommy was there instantly, helping her up. "I'm fine." but her voice shook. The baby. Was the baby all right? That's what happens when you put a woman in boots too big for her, Red said from the barn door. Maybe next time the boss will think twice about his charity cases. That's enough. Cole's voice cut across the yard like a whip. He'd emerged from the barn behind Red. You got something to say, Red? You say it to my face. Red turned, his expression defiant. Just calling it like I see it, boss. This ain't no place for a woman in her condition. She's gonna get hurt, or worse. Then what? Then that's between her and me, Cole said evenly. Not you. I got a right to my opinion. You got a right to work or leave, Cole interrupted. Those are your choices. Make one. Red's face flushed an ugly shade of purple. For a moment, Clara thought he might swing at Cole, but Cole stood perfectly still, hands loose at his sides, eyes steady. The kind of stillness that promised swift violence if provoked. Red backed down. I'm just saying what needs saying. He turned and stalked off toward the bunkhouse. Cole walked over to Clara, who was still catching her breath. You hurt? I don't think so. She pressed a hand to her belly. No cramping, no blood. The baby kicked as if in reassurance. I'm all right. That rock wasn't there this morning, Cole said quietly. I'd stake my ranch on it. Clara understood. Red had put it there, deliberately. She'd been sabotaged. I'll talk to him, Cole said. Don't. Clara straightened up, forcing strength into her voice. It'll only make it worse. I can handle Red. Clara, see, I can handle it, she repeated firmly. I've handled worse than him. Cole studied her for a long moment. I believe you have, he said finally. But this is my ranch, and I won't have hands making it unsafe for other hands. That's not negotiable. That night, Clara heard raised voices from the barn, Cole and Red arguing. She couldn't make out words, but the tone was clear enough. The next morning, Red's hostility had shifted. Still present, but more careful. More contained. Cole had established boundaries. Red would respect them or leave. But the incident left Clara shaken in ways she didn't want to admit. She'd been so focused on proving she could work, on earning her keep, that she hadn't fully considered the danger. Not just from resentful ranch hands, but from her own body's limitations. She was 7 months pregnant, growing larger by the day, working on a ranch with heavy machinery, large animals, and 100 ways to get hurt. What if she fell again? What if next time she couldn't catch herself? What if... She pushed the thoughts away. Fear was a luxury she couldn't afford. All she could do was be careful, stay focused, and keep moving forward. One day at a time, one task at a time. It was all any of them could do. As October turned to November, the weather grew colder. Frost painted the grass white each morning. The cattle were brought down from the high pastures, a 3-day operation that left everyone exhausted. Clara helped where she could, minding the gates, counting heads, making meals for the men who came back cold and hungry. She was in the kitchen one evening, stirring a pot of stew, when Cole came in from the barn. He stomped snow from his boots and hung his coat, then stood warming his hands at the stove. Storm's coming, he said. Big one, if the signs are right. We'll need to batten down tomorrow. Move extra hay into the barn, check all the roofs, make sure the animals have shelter. Clara nodded, still stirring. I can help. I know you can. He paused. But when the storm hits, I want you in the main house, not the bunkhouse. It's warmer, more secure. Closer if anything happens. If she goes into labor, he meant. Neither of them said it aloud. All right, Clara agreed quietly. The storm arrived the next afternoon with shocking violence. The sky turned black, the temperature plummeted, and snow began to fall in thick, blinding sheets. Wind howled around the buildings like a living thing, shaking walls and rattling windows. Clara huddled in the main house, watching through the frosted window as the world disappeared into white chaos. She could barely see the barn, 50 yards away. The bunkhouse was completely invisible. Cole had been right to bring her here. The main house was solid, built to withstand Montana winters. But even so, the storm's fury was terrifying. It'll blow itself out by morning, Cole said, stoking the fire. Usually does. But morning came and the storm raged on. Another day, another night. The world contracted to just this house, this room, this fire. Cole and Clara existed in a strange kind of limbo. Not quite strangers anymore, not quite friends. They spoke little, but the silence was comfortable. He whittled by the fire. She mended shirts, basic human companionship in the face of nature's indifference. On the third day, Clara finally broke the quiet. "Why did you hire me?" Cole looked up from the piece of wood in his hands. "Needed help." "You could have hired anyone. Tommy could have recommended someone from town, someone without—" "Who?" She gestured at her belly. "Someone respectable," Cole finished. He was quiet for a moment, studying the half-carved piece in his hands. "My sister got pregnant out of wedlock, 16 years old. Family threw her out. She ended up in a city 300 miles from anyone who knew her name. Tried to make it on her own." He paused. "She died in childbirth. Her and the baby both. Alone in a charity ward." The words fell into the room like stones into still water. "I'm sorry," Clara said softly. "It was a long time ago." Cole's hands moved again, carving. "But I remember how it started. How quick the town turned on her. How there wasn't a single Christian soul willing to offer a hand without demanding shame and payment." His eyes met Clara's. "Saw you standing in that street, everyone looking right through you, and I thought about Emma. Thought maybe this time it could go different." Clara's throat tightened. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me. You're earning your keep." But his voice was gentle. The storm finally broke on the fourth morning. Clara woke to silence. No howling wind, no battering snow. Just stillness and the drip of melting ice. The world outside was transformed. Snow lay 3 feet deep, sculpted into fantastic drifts by the wind. The sun, emerging from clouds, turned it all to blinding brilliance. Cole went out to check on the animals. Clara stood at the window watching him wade through the drifts and felt something shift in her chest. Not love. She was too careful for that, too scarred. But gratitude, certainly, and respect, and maybe the first faint beginning of trust. The baby kicked, strong and insistent. Clara put her hand over the movement and smiled. "We might be all right," she whispered. "We just might make it through." November passed into December. The ranch settled into winter routine, feeding livestock, breaking ice on water troughs, keeping buildings warm and secure. Clara's belly grew enormous, making simple tasks difficult. But she adapted, finding new ways to work, refusing to become useless. Cole moved her into the main house permanently. "Makes more sense," he said gruffly. "Kitchen's warmer, easier to cook for everyone from here." It was true. But Clara suspected the real reason was concern for her safety. The baby could come any time now, and the bunkhouse was too far from help. She took over the main house's domestic management, cooking, cleaning, mending. It felt strange to be in another man's home, using his kitchen, sleeping in his spare room. But Cole was scrupulous about propriety. He never entered her room, never made her uncomfortable, never asked for anything beyond her work. The arrangement worked. More than worked. It felt almost natural, as if they'd been running this ranch together for years instead of months. One evening in mid-December, a rider arrived just before dark. Clara was setting the table for supper when she heard hoofbeats. Through the window, she saw a man on a gray horse, well-dressed in a city coat and expensive hat. Her blood turned to ice. She knew that horse, knew that coat, knew the set of those shoulders. James Hardwick, who'd whispered promises in the dark and disappeared when those promises demanded keeping. James, whose family had paid her to leave Philadelphia. James, who'd sworn he loved her even as he let his mother call her a whore. James had found her. Cole stepped out onto the porch as the man dismounted. Clara couldn't hear their conversation, but she saw Cole's body language shift, less open, more guarded. Then James looked toward the house and saw her through the window. Even at this distance, she saw recognition flash across his face. "Clara!" He started toward the house, but Cole stepped into his path. "This is private property," Cole said, his voice carrying clearly. "State your business." "My business is with Clara Whitmore." "That's her, isn't it? In your house?" James's voice dripped with insinuation. Clara's hands clenched on the back of a chair. She should have known. Should have realized James's family would want this scandal contained, resolved, erased. They'd sent him to collect her, to force a marriage that would salvage their reputation, even if it destroyed hers. Cole glanced back at the house, at Clara. His expression asked a silent question. Do you want to see him? Clara shook her head. No, never again. Cole turned back to James. The lady doesn't wish to see you. I'll thank you to leave. The lady? James laughed, sharp and ugly. Is that what she told you? That she's a lady? Did she mention she's carrying my bastard child? The words hung in the cold air. Clara saw Tommy and Red emerge from the barn, drawn by the commotion. What she's carrying is none of my concern, Cole said evenly. What is my concern is that you're on my land uninvited. Leave, now. I have a right. You have no rights here, Cole's voice hardened. Whatever happened between you and Clara happened somewhere else. Whatever you think you're owed, you won't collect it here. Get back on your horse. James's face flushed. You don't understand. My family sent me to make this right, to marry her, legitimize the child, give her what any decent woman would want. Then I suggest you find a decent woman who wants it, Cole said. This one doesn't. Clara felt tears sting her eyes. Not of sadness, but of something fiercer. Relief. Vindication. For months she'd been punished for James's actions. For months she'd carried shame that was only half hers. And now, finally, someone was telling him no. Someone was making him face consequences. James tried to push past Cole toward the house. It was a mistake. Cole's hand shot out, gripping James's shoulder and spinning him back. I said leave. Take your hands off me. James swung wildly. Cole ducked easily and shoved him back toward his horse. You've got two choices, Cole said, his voice deadly calm. You can ride out of here peacefully, or I can throw you off my land. Decide. James looked from Cole to the house, to Clara watching through the window. His face twisted with anger and humiliation. This isn't over. My family has lawyers. We have money. You can do whatever you want, as long as you do it somewhere else, Cole interrupted. Clock's ticking. Make your choice. For a long moment, James stood frozen, pride warring with self-preservation. Finally, self-preservation won. He mounted his horse in jerky, furious movements. You're making a mistake, he said to Clara through the window. Marrying me would give you respectability. Give the child a name. What do you think you'll have here? You'll always be the whore who worked for Ranchers' Charity. Clara opened the door and stepped onto the porch, one hand on her enormous belly. I'd rather be a whore with dignity than a wife with none, she said clearly. Go home, James. There's nothing for you here. James's face contorted. For a second, Clara thought he might say something else, something cruel. But Cole stepped closer to the porch, positioning himself between James and Clara, and whatever words James had died on his tongue. He wheeled his horse and galloped off into the gathering dark. Clara watched him go, feeling something inside her finally, fully break free. The last chain of obligation, of shame, of what-ifs. James was her past. This ranch, this life, this was her future. Uncertain, difficult, unorthodox. But hers. Cole walked back to the porch. You all right? Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. He might come back, Cole said. Bring those lawyers he mentioned. Let him. Clara's voice was stronger now. I won't go with him. I won't marry him. Not for his name, not for his money, not for all the respectability in the world. Cole nodded slowly. Then he won't take you. It was a promise, simple and absolute. Clara believed him. That night, she lay in bed listening to the house settle around her. Outside, the winter wind whispered across the frozen land. Inside, the house was warm and solid. The baby kicked, a now familiar sensation. Clara put her hand over the movement and smiled in the darkness. Your father was here tonight, she whispered. But he's gone now. And we're still here. We're still standing. The baby kicked again, as if in agreement. Clara closed her eyes and slept better than she had in months. The first snow after James's departure fell soft and silent, blanketing the ranch in a deceptive peace. Clara stood at the kitchen window, watching fat flakes drift down through the lamplight, her hands submerged in dishwater that had gone lukewarm. The baby pressed against her ribs, a constant presence now, so large she could barely remember what her body had felt like before. Behind her, Cole sat at the table mending a bridle, his needle moving with surprising delicacy for such large hands. The fire crackled, the clock ticked. Outside, the world transformed itself into something clean and unmarked. You're quiet tonight, Cole said without looking up from his work. Clara dried her hands on her apron. Just thinking. About him? She didn't have to ask who. About what comes next. Cole set down the bridle. What do you want to come next? It was such a simple question, but no one had asked her that in months. Not what she should do, what was proper, what would salvage her reputation, just what she wanted. I want to stay here, Clara said slowly. I want to have this baby and raise it without shame. I want to work and earn my keep and not owe anyone anything. She turned to face him. But I know that's not realistic. James's family has money, like he said. They could make trouble. And even if they don't, once word spreads in town about who I am, what I am... You're a woman who works hard and keeps her word, Cole interrupted. That's what you are. The rest is just talk. Talk matters in places like Redemption Falls. Then it's a good thing this ranch isn't in Redemption Falls. Cole stood, walking to the window beside her. I meant what I said to Hardwick. He wants you. He'll have to go through me. Same goes for his family and their lawyers. Clara felt something warm unfurl in her chest. Why are you doing this? Really? It can't just be about your sister. Cole was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the falling snow. Maybe it started that way, he said finally, but that's not why anymore. Then why? He turned to look at her, his gray eyes serious. Because you're the best hand I've had in 2 years. Because you've worked harder in 3 months than Red has in 6. Because you don't complain, don't shirk, and don't make excuses. He paused. And because I respect the hell out of someone who'd rather face an uncertain future alone than accept a comfortable lie. Clara's throat tightened. She'd grown used to contempt, to pity, even to the rare kindness tinged with condescension. But respect, simple, honest respect, that was something she hadn't felt in so long she'd almost forgotten what it was like. Thank you, she whispered. Cole nodded once and returned to his mending. The conversation was over, but something had shifted between them. An understanding reached without fanfare or sentiment. They were partners in this strange enterprise of survival, each carrying their own weight, each trusting the other to do the same. The snow fell harder through the night. By morning, it lay knee-deep across the ranch, transforming familiar landscapes into alien terrain. Cole and Tommy spent the day breaking paths between buildings, checking on livestock, hauling hay to animals that couldn't forage through the drifts. Clara worked inside, baking bread and preparing a massive pot of stew that would feed them for days. The kitchen was her domain now, and she'd made it efficient. Jars of preserves lined the shelves, dried herbs hung from the rafters. Everything had its place, its purpose. Red came in at noon, stamping snow from his boots. He'd been civil since Cole's warning, but the hostility still simmered beneath the surface. He took his plate without a word and sat at the far end of the table, eating in aggressive silence. Storm's getting worse, Tommy said, accepting his own bowl with a grateful nod. Cole says we might be snowed in for a week if it keeps up. Then we'd better check the supplies, Clara said. Make sure we have enough of everything. Red snorted. Since when does a ranch hand give orders about supplies? Clara met his eyes steadily. Since the ranch hand is the one managing the kitchen. You have a problem with the food, Red? I got a problem with a lot of things. Red shoved his bowl away. But seems my opinion don't count for much around here anymore. Your opinion counts when it's about work, Cole said from the doorway. None of them had heard him come in. When it's about making trouble, it counts for nothing. Which one is this? Red's jaw worked. Just making conversation. Then make it somewhere else. Red stood, grabbed his coat, and stalked out. Tommy ducked his head over his stew, clearly wishing he were anywhere else. Cole hung his coat and joined them at the table. How are the supplies looking? Good for a week, maybe more if we're careful, Clara reported. We're low on coffee, but everything else should hold. We can live without coffee. Cole accepted the bowl she handed him. Anything else? Clara hesitated. I need to ask you something. Tommy suddenly became very interested in finishing his meal. He gulped the last of his stew and practically fled the kitchen, mumbling something about checking the horses. When they were alone, Clara sat down across from Cole. The baby's going to come soon, maybe a few weeks, maybe less. I need to know, when it happens, what's the plan? Is there a doctor in town? A midwife? Cole set down his spoon. There's a doctor, Doc Warren. He's competent from what I hear, but getting him out here in winter... He glanced toward the window where snow still fell in thick curtains. Could be difficult. And a midwife? Mrs. Chen, the apothecary's wife. She's helped with births before. But same problem. Getting her here could take hours, depending on the weather. Clara nodded slowly, feeling fear flutter in her stomach. She'd been so focused on surviving each day that she hadn't fully confronted this reality. When the baby came, she might be on her own. No doctor, no midwife, no experienced woman to guide her through the most dangerous thing her body would ever do. "I've delivered calves," Cole said quietly. "And a foal once. It's not the same, I know. But if it comes to it, I won't let you face it alone." The image was almost funny, this taciturn rancher playing midwife. But the sincerity in his voice chased away any humor. He meant it. He would help if needed, awkward and inexperienced as that help might be. "Let's hope it doesn't come to that," Clara said. "Let's hope," Cole agreed. But hope, Clara had learned, was a luxury. Planning was survival. That evening, after the men had returned to the bunkhouse, she sat in her room with a medical handbook she'd found on Cole's shelf and read everything she could about childbirth. The clinical descriptions both helped and terrified her. At least she'd know what to expect. At least she wouldn't go into it blind. The snow finally stopped 3 days later, leaving the world buried and silent. The men dug out the ranch, path by path, building by building. It was brutal work that left them exhausted and silent at meals. Clara, confined to the house by her size and the danger of falling on ice, threw herself into domestic tasks. She reorganized the pantry, mended every piece of clothing that needed it, and began sewing baby clothes from scraps of fabric she'd found in a trunk. Tiny shirts, small blankets, impossibly little socks. Each stitch was an act of faith that the baby would live, that she would live, that they would need these things. Tommy found her one afternoon, sitting by the window with her sewing. He knocked softly on the doorframe, hat in his hands. "Ma'am, could I talk to you a minute?" Clara set down her work. "Of course. Come in." Tommy entered awkwardly, clearly uncomfortable. "I just wanted to say about Red, about how he talks. It ain't right, and I'm sorry I never said nothing before." "You don't need to apologize for him, Tommy. I know, but I should have stood up, should have told him to shut his mouth." Tommy twisted his hat. "My ma raised me better than that." Clara smiled gently. "You're a good man, Tommy. Don't let Red's bitterness make you doubt that." "He weren't always so bitter," Tommy said. "When I first came here, he was different, quieter, but not mean. Something changed about 6 months back. He got a letter from back east. Family trouble, I think. After that, he was just angry all the time." "Anger has to go somewhere," Clara observed. "Right now, he's putting it on me. But it's not really about me." "Maybe not, but that don't make it right." "No," Clara agreed. "It doesn't." Tommy left, and Clara returned to her sewing, but his words stayed with her. She'd been so focused on Red's hostility toward her that she hadn't considered what might be driving it. Pain, perhaps. Loss. His own struggles that had nothing to do with her but needed an outlet. It didn't excuse his behavior, but it made him human, at least. Not a villain, just a man carrying burdens he didn't know how to set down. Christmas approached, though Clara barely noticed. Time had become strange. The days short and dark, the nights long and cold, everything blurring together in a haze of waiting. She marked the calendar more out of habit than meaning. December 25th was just another day to get through. But Cole had other ideas. On Christmas Eve, Clara woke to the smell of pine. She emerged from her room to find Cole dragging a small evergreen through the front door. "What are you doing?" "It's Christmas," Cole said, as if that explained everything. He positioned the tree in the corner and stood back to assess it. "Figured we should mark it." "We don't have decorations." "Then we'll make some." It was absurd. They were snowed in on a remote ranch in Montana. She was 9 months pregnant, and he wanted to decorate a Christmas tree. But the absurdity of it made Clara smile, really smile, for the first time in weeks. They spent the afternoon crafting decorations from whatever they could find. Clara cut stars from tin scraps and punched patterns in them. Cole carved small animals from wood. Tommy contributed strings of dried berries. Even Red, in a moment of unexpected participation, fashioned a passable angel from wire and fabric scraps. By evening, the tree stood decorated in homemade ornaments, each one simple and imperfect and somehow beautiful. Clara lit candles around the room, and the small house glowed with warm light. For dinner, Clara had managed something special: roasted chicken, real gravy, biscuits, and even a pie made from their dwindling supply of dried apples. The four of them sat together at the table, and for once there was no tension, no hostility, just four people sharing a meal on a cold winter night. "My ma used to make apple pie," Tommy said, accepting a second slice. "Never as good as this, though." "Your mama would box your ears for saying that," Clara teased. "Probably," Tommy admitted with a grin. Even Red seemed softer in the candlelight, the hard edges of his anger temporarily smoothed. "My family never made much of Christmas," he said quietly. "Too many mouths to feed as it was." "Where was home?" Clara asked gently. "Ohio, farm that barely kept us alive." Red stared at his plate. "Lost it 3 years back. Bank took it. Family scattered. Haven't seen any of them since." The words hung in the air, heavy with loss. Clara understood better now. Red wasn't angry at her. He was angry at a world that had taken everything from him and given nothing back. She just happened to be convenient. "I'm sorry," she said simply. Red nodded, not looking up. Ancient history now. But it wasn't, Clara thought. Pain didn't become ancient just because time passed. It just got buried deeper. After dinner, Cole pulled out a battered harmonica and played a few simple carols. His playing was rough but earnest, and Clara found herself humming along. Tommy's voice joined in, surprisingly sweet for such a young man. Even Red muttered a few words of Silent Night. It wasn't the Christmas Clara had imagined when she was young, dreaming of family and tradition. But it was something real, something earned, a moment of peace carved out of hardship. That night, lying in bed, Clara felt the baby move with unusual force, not kicking exactly, but shifting, settling lower. She put her hand on her belly and felt the change. It was time. Maybe not tonight, maybe not tomorrow, but soon, very soon. The next morning, Clara woke to wetness and a low, dull ache in her back. She sat up carefully, her heart beginning to race. Not yet, she thought. Not on Christmas morning, not with the ranch still half buried in snow, not... Another pain, stronger this time, rolling through her abdomen like a wave. Yes, now. She made it to the door of her room and called out, trying to keep her voice steady. "Cole?" He was there in seconds, still pulling on his shirt. "What's wrong?" "The baby, it's coming." Cole's face went carefully blank, the way it did when he was managing fear. "How long between pains?" "I don't know. 2 just started." All right. He ran a hand through his hair. "Get back in bed. I'll send Tommy for the midwife." But when Tommy rode out an hour later, he was back within 30 minutes, his face grim. "Trail's completely blocked. That last storm dropped a tree across the road, and there's drifts 6 feet high. I can't get through." "What about the other trail?" Cole demanded. "Same story. We're cut off." Clara, laboring through another contraction in her room, heard the conversation through the thin walls. Cut off. No midwife. No doctor. Just her, the baby, and whatever help Cole could provide. She should have been terrified. Part of her was. But another part. The part that had survived Philadelphia, survived the journey west, survived everything else, simply accepted it. This was the situation. Fear wouldn't change it. She had to work with what she had. The contractions grew stronger as morning turned to afternoon. Clara walked the room between them, as the medical book had advised, trying to stay calm and focused. Cole brought water, clean linens, towels. He'd clearly been reading the same book, preparing in his methodical way. "Tommy's keeping the stove going," he reported during a lull. "Red's watching the stock. You don't need to worry about anything except this." "Easy for you to say," Clara gasped as another contraction hit. They were coming faster now, harder. The pain was unlike anything she'd experienced, all-consuming, unstoppable, a force of nature moving through her body whether she was ready or not. Cole stayed with her, his presence solid and steady. He didn't flinch when she gripped his hand hard enough to hurt during contractions. Didn't show fear when she cried out. Just stayed, hour after hour, as the winter sun traced its short arc across the sky and darkness fell again. By evening, Clara was exhausted. The contractions were nearly constant now, giving her barely any time to breathe between them. Everything had narrowed to pain and breath and the desperate need to push. "I can see the head," Cole said, his voice carefully controlled. "You're almost there, Clara. Just a little more." She bore down with everything she had left, feeling her body tear and stretch beyond what seemed possible. The pain was blinding, transcendent, reducing the world to a single point of impossible pressure. And then, suddenly, release. A baby's cry filled the room, thin and outraged and absolutely perfect. "It's a girl," Cole said, his voice rough with emotion. "You have a daughter." Clara collapsed back against the pillows, sobbing with relief and exhaustion and joy so fierce it hurt. Cole wrapped the baby in a clean blanket and placed her in Clara's arms. A tiny, red-faced creature with a shock of dark hair and lungs that clearly worked just fine. "Hello?" Clara whispered, touching the baby's impossibly small hand. Tiny fingers wrapped around her finger with surprising strength. "Hello, little one. We made it. We're here." The baby quieted at her voice, dark eyes opening to stare up with newborn solemnity. Cole busied himself with the practical matters, cleaning up, checking that Clara wasn't bleeding too heavily, making sure both mother and child were as comfortable as possible. His hands were steady, but Clara saw them shake slightly when he thought she wasn't looking. "Thank you," she said softly. "I couldn't have done this without you." Cole paused in his work. "Yes, you could have. You're the strongest person I've ever met." He met her eyes. "But I'm glad I could help." Later, when Clara had been cleaned and settled with the baby nursing at her breast, Cole brought her soup and bread. "You need to eat. Keep your strength up." Clara obeyed, realizing she was ravenous. The baby nursed with single-minded determination, and Clara marveled at the instinct of it, the way both their bodies simply knew what to do. "Have you thought about a name?" Cole asked. Clara looked down at her daughter. She'd avoided thinking about names, as if choosing one might jinx things, might assume too much. But now, with the baby real and alive and perfect in her arms, the name came easily. "Emma," she said. "After your sister. If that's all right." Cole's expression shifted, surprise, then something deeper, grief and gratitude mixed together. "That's more than all right," he said quietly. Emma would have been honored. The baby, Emma, made a small sound, something between a sigh and a snore. Clara smiled, feeling exhaustion pull at her. "Sleep," Cole said. "I'll stay close in case you need anything." Clara didn't argue. She let herself sink into sleep with her daughter safe in her arms, in a house that had become home, protected by a man who asked for nothing but gave everything. The days after Emma's birth passed in a blur of feeding and sleeping and discovering the rhythms of caring for a newborn. Cole had rigged a cradle from a wooden box, padded with soft blankets. It sat beside Clara's bed, close enough that she could reach out and touch Emma whenever fear spiked in the night. Tommy and Red took over most of the ranch work, giving Clara time to heal and adjust to motherhood. Red's attitude had shifted noticeably since Christmas. He didn't exactly warm to Clara, but the open hostility was gone. He even carved a small rattle from wood and left it wordlessly on the kitchen table. "For the baby," Tommy explained when Clara found it, "Red don't talk much about feelings, but that's his way." Clara kept the rattle, and Emma seemed to enjoy the soft clacking sound it made. A week after Emma's birth, the weather finally broke. The trails cleared enough for travel, and Cole rode to town to report the birth and secure official documentation. He returned with supplies, news, and a grim expression. "Hardwick's been asking questions," he said, unpacking flour and sugar in the kitchen. "His family hired a lawyer. They're claiming they have rights to the child." Clara's blood ran cold. She'd known this might come, but hearing it made it real. "What kind of rights?" "Legal paternity. They're saying since Hardwick acknowledges the child is his, he has a claim. They want you to return to Philadelphia for a proper marriage." "Over my dead body." "Might come to that." Cole's voice was flat. "Their lawyer's smart. He's talking about the child's welfare, saying she deserves her father's name and support, making you look like you're denying her opportunities out of spite." Clara sat down heavily, Emma asleep in her arms. "What do I do?" "We fight." Cole pulled out a chair and sat across from her. "I talked to Judge Morrison while I was in town, explained the situation. He's willing to hear your side if it comes to court." "And what is my side?" That I'd rather raise my daughter in poverty than marry her father? Clara heard the bitterness in her own voice. That sounds like pride, not principle. That sounds like a woman protecting her child from a man who only wants her to save his family's reputation, Cole corrected. There's a difference. Emma stirred in Clara's arms, making small, suckling motions even in sleep. Clara looked down at her daughter and felt something fierce and protective rise in her chest. This tiny person was hers, not James's, not his family's. Hers. She'd carried Emma, suffered for her, nearly died bringing her into the world. No lawyer, no matter how smart, could change that. When's the hearing? She asked. 3 weeks, January 15th. 3 weeks to prepare. 3 weeks to figure out how to convince a judge that an unwed mother working on a ranch was a better option than a wealthy Philadelphia family. 3 weeks to save her daughter's future. Clara straightened her shoulders. Then we'd better get started. Over the next weeks, Clara and Cole built their case. Cole testified to her character, her work ethic, her fierce love for Emma. Tommy added his voice, speaking honestly about how Clara had transformed the ranch, brought order and warmth to what had been a rough bachelor operation. Even Red, in his gruff way, admitted she was the best cook they'd had and a damn hard worker. But Clara knew it might not be enough. The law favored fathers, especially wealthy ones. The fact that she'd refused James's proposal could be twisted to make her look stubborn and selfish. The night before the hearing, Clara sat in the kitchen long after everyone else had gone to bed. Emma slept in her cradle in the next room, her breathing soft and even. Clara stared at her cold coffee and tried to imagine losing, tried to picture handing Emma over to James and his cold, calculating family. She couldn't. The image wouldn't form. It was simply impossible. Can't sleep? Cole's voice came from the doorway. Too much thinking. He poured himself coffee and sat down. Want to share? I'm scared, Clara admitted. I know we have good arguments. I know we've done everything we can. But I also know how the world works. Money talks, respectability matters, and I have neither. You have something better. What's that? You have truth. Cole leaned forward. You love that baby more than anything in the world. Hardwick loves his family's reputation. When you stand in front of that judge tomorrow, which do you think will shine through? Clara wanted to believe him, but she'd seen too much of the world to think love always won. Still, it was all she had. Love, determination, and the fierce conviction that Emma deserved better than a father who saw her as a problem to be solved. Whatever happens tomorrow, Cole said quietly, you're not alone in this. You understand that? Clara met his eyes across the table. In the lamplight, they were warm, steady, and absolutely sincere. I understand, she whispered. And for the first time since James had ridden onto the ranch with his demands and his lawyers, Clara felt something like hope. The courthouse in Redemption Falls was a stark brick building that squatted at the edge of town like a watchful sentinel. Clara had passed it countless times during her first desperate day in town, but she'd never imagined she'd enter it with her entire future hanging in the balance. Now, climbing the stone steps with Emma bundled against her chest, she felt the weight of 100 staring eyes. The townspeople had come out in force, not to support her, but to witness the scandal. Cole walked beside her, his hand light on her elbow. Tommy followed a step behind, his young face set with nervous determination. Even Red had come, though he hung back near the entrance, hat pulled low. Inside, the courtroom smelled of old wood and older judgment. James sat at the plaintiff's table with his lawyer, a sharp-faced man in an expensive suit whose very posture radiated East Coast superiority. James didn't look at Clara. He kept his eyes forward, jaw tight, as if her presence embarrassed him. Judge Morrison was a weathered man in his 60s with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen too much frontier justice to be impressed by city lawyers. He took his seat behind the bench and surveyed the room with the air of someone deeply tired of human foolishness. This is a hearing to determine custodial rights regarding the minor child Emma Whitmore, he announced. Mr. Hardwick's counsel has petitioned for paternity rights and custody transfer. Miss Whitmore contests this petition. He looked at the expensive lawyer. Mr. Blackwell, you may begin. Blackwell stood, smoothing his jacket. Your Honor, this is a simple matter of a child's welfare. My client, Mr. James Hardwick, acknowledges paternity of the infant in question. He has offered repeatedly to marry Miss Whitmore, to legitimize the child, and to provide for both mother and daughter in a manner befitting their station. Miss Whitmore has refused all such offers, choosing instead to live in, he paused delicately, questionable circumstances on a remote ranch with men to whom she is not related. Clara felt her face flush, but Cole's hand found hers under the table and squeezed once. Steady. The Hardwick family is prepared to provide the child with education, opportunity, and social standing, Blackwell continued. They can offer a stable home, financial security, and the respectability that comes with bearing the Hardwick name. What can Miss Whitmore offer? Manual labor? A life of poverty? The stigma of illegitimacy? He shook his head sadly. Your Honor, my client seeks only what is best for his daughter. Surely the court can see that a child deserves her father's name and protection. Blackwell sat down, looking satisfied. James still hadn't looked at Clara. Judge Morrison turned to Clara. Miss Whitmore, do you have representation? Clara stood, her legs trembling slightly. No, Your Honor, I'm speaking for myself. Very well. Proceed. Clara's mouth was dry. She'd rehearsed this 100 times in her head, but now, facing the judge and the packed courtroom, the words seemed to scatter. She looked down at Emma, asleep in her arms, and felt clarity return. Your Honor, Mr. Blackwell is right about one thing. Emma deserves the best future possible, but he's wrong about what that means. Clara's voice grew stronger. Mr. Hardwick claims he wants what's best for his daughter, but he didn't want her when I told him I was pregnant. His family paid me to leave Philadelphia. They called me a liar, and worse, they threatened to destroy my reputation if I didn't disappear. That's a damned lie, James shot to his feet. Mr. Hardwick, sit down, Judge Morrison said sharply. You'll have your chance to speak. James sat, but his face was red with fury, or shame, or both. For months I heard nothing from James or his family, Clara continued. Not a letter, not a penny, not a word of concern for the child they now claim to care so much about. They only came looking for me after Emma was born, after it became impossible to pretend she didn't exist. This isn't about Emma's welfare. It's about protecting the Hardwick reputation. And what about your reputation, Miss Whitmore? Blackwell interjected. An unmarried woman living with strange men. I'm employed by Mr. Bennett as a ranch hand, Clara cut in. I work for wages, same as Tommy and Red. I earn my keep through honest labor. There's nothing questionable about that except in the minds of people who think a woman's only value is her reputation. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Judge Morrison rapped his gavel once. Order. Your Honor, I love my daughter, Clara said, her voice cracking slightly. I carried her for 9 months. I nearly died bringing her into this world. I feed her, care for her, would give my life for her without hesitation. Can Mr. Hardwick say the same? Does he even know her? Has he held her once, fed her once, stayed up through the night when she cries? James was staring at his hands now, and Clara felt a small, bitter satisfaction. The Hardwicks can offer money and a name, Clara continued, but they can't offer love. They can't offer the truth about who Emma is and where she comes from. If I let them take her, she'll grow up believing a lie, that her father wanted her, that her mother was too selfish to accept his generosity. I won't do that to her. I won't let her spend her life ashamed of where she began. Clara sat down, her heart pounding. Emma stirred in her arms, but didn't wake. Judge Morrison looked at James. Mr. Hardwick, stand up. James stood, his expensive suit suddenly seeming like a costume. Beside Clara, Cole had gone very still, watching. You've sat in my courtroom and let your lawyer speak for you, the judge said. Now I want to hear from you directly. Do you love this child? James's mouth opened and closed. Of course. She's mine. That's not what I asked. I asked if you love her. The silence stretched. James looked at Emma, really looked at her for the first time since entering the courtroom. Clara saw something flicker across his face. Not love exactly, but perhaps the recognition of how this must appear. I want to do right by her, James said finally. Give her my name, provide for her. Out of love or obligation? Does it matter? Yes, Judge Morrison said flatly. It matters a great deal. He leaned back in his chair. Mr. Blackwell, your argument rests on the assumption that material wealth trumps maternal care. In some jurisdictions, that might carry weight. But this is Montana territory, Mr. Hardwick, not Philadelphia. Out here, we value different things. Blackwell stood quickly. Your Honor, surely you're not suggesting that poverty and illegitimacy are preferable to... I'm suggesting that a mother who works herself to the bone to provide for her child shows more character than a father who only acknowledges that child when it becomes socially convenient. The judge's voice was sharp. I've heard testimony from multiple witnesses about Miss Whitmore's conduct. Every single one speaks to her integrity, her work ethic, and her devotion to her daughter. What testimony do you offer about Mr. Hardwick's devotion? Money? A name? Those are things, counselor, not love. James's face had gone pale. Clara hardly dared to breathe. However, Judge Morrison continued, and Clara's heart sank. The question of paternity rights is complex. Mr. Hardwick does have a legal claim to his biological child. The law recognizes this, however questionable his motives. Your Honor. Clara started to stand, but Cole's hand on her arm stopped her. I'm not finished, the judge said. Montana law also recognizes that the welfare of the child is paramount. Miss Whitmore, you've demonstrated that you can provide adequate care, but adequate isn't the same as ideal. A child needs stability, education, opportunity. I can provide those things, Clara said desperately. Maybe not fancy schools or silk dresses, but I can teach her to read, to think, to stand on her own feet. Can you do it alone? The question hung in the air. Clara opened her mouth, then closed it. Alone. That was the crux of it, wasn't it? A single mother, no matter how devoted, was always vulnerable. Illness, injury, death, any of them could leave Emma orphaned and defenseless. She's not alone. Cole's voice cut through the silence. He stood, his weathered hands gripping the back of the chair in front of him. Mr. Bennett, Judge Morrison said, you wish to speak. If it pleases the court. Cole didn't look at Clara, kept his eyes fixed on the judge. Miss Whitmore isn't raising Emma alone. She has support, a home, employment, people who care about her welfare and the child's. That's admirable, Mr. Bennett, but unless you're proposing something more permanent, I am. Cole's voice was steady, certain. I'm proposing marriage. The courtroom erupted. Clara's head snapped around to stare at Cole, her mouth open in shock. James lunged to his feet, shouting something about manipulation and fraud. Blackwell was objecting loudly. Judge Morrison's gavel cracked like thunder. Order! I will have order in this courtroom. When the noise died down, Cole was still standing, unmoved by the chaos he'd caused. Explain yourself, Mr. Bennett, the judge said. It's simple, Your Honor. I'm asking Clara to marry me. If she accepts, Emma will have 2 parents, a stable home, and all the security Mr. Hardwick claims to offer, plus something his money can't buy. A family that wants her. Clara couldn't find words. Her mind reeled. Marriage. Cole was proposing marriage, in a courtroom, in front of half the town, to save her. This is insane, James's voice was shrill. He's manipulating the situation. You can't allow this, Your Honor. It's fraud, a sham marriage to deny me my rights. Is it a sham, Mr. Bennett? Judge Morrison asked. Cole finally looked at Clara. His gray eyes were calm, honest, asking a question without words. Trust me. No, sir, Cole said. I have the deepest respect for Clara. I believe she'd make a fine wife, and I'd be proud to raise Emma as my own, if she'll have me. The judge turned to Clara. Miss Whitmore? Clara looked at Emma, sleeping peacefully through all the chaos. Then at James, whose face was twisted with impotent rage. Then at Cole, who stood solid and certain, offering her an escape she'd never asked for, but desperately needed. She could say no, could face the judge's ruling alone, risk losing Emma to James's lawyers and money and influence, could maintain her pride and her independence, and possibly lose everything that mattered. Or she could say yes, could accept Cole's offer, marry a man she respected but didn't love, build a life on partnership instead of passion. Yes, Clara heard herself say. I'll marry you. The courtroom exploded again. James was shouting. Blackwell was objecting. Half the audience was scandalized and the other half delighted by the drama. Judge Morrison let it go on for exactly 10 seconds before his gavel silenced them all. Interesting development, he said dryly. Mr. Blackwell, do you wish to contest this engagement? Your Honor, this is clearly a strategic maneuver designed to provide the child with exactly what you claim Mr. Hardwick wants to provide. 2 parents, a stable home, security. The judge's expression was unreadable. Unless you're arguing that your client's money makes him a better father than a man willing to raise another man's child as his own? Blackwell's mouth worked soundlessly. It was a trap, and they all knew it. If he argued against Cole's fitness, he undermined the entire foundation of his case, that a father, any father, was better than an unmarried mother. "I'll need time to consult with my client," Blackwell said stiffly. "You have 5 minutes. Court is in recess." The judge disappeared into his chambers. The courtroom dissolved into chaos. Clara sat frozen, still holding Emma, trying to process what had just happened. Cole had proposed. She'd accepted. In less than 2 minutes, her entire future had been rewritten. "Are you all right?" Cole asked quietly, sitting down beside her. "I don't know." Clara's voice sounded distant to her own ears. "Did that really just happen?" "It did. And if you want to take it back, no." Clara surprised herself with the firmness of the word. "No, I don't want to take it back. But Cole, you don't have to do this. This is my fight, my problem. It stopped being just your problem the day you set foot on my ranch," Cole said. "And it stopped being a problem at all the day Emma was born. This isn't sacrifice, Clara. This is choice." Before Clara could respond, James appeared at their table, Blackwell trying and failing to restrain him. "This is pathetic," James hissed, leaning close. "You'd marry some dirt-poor rancher just to spite me?" "I'd marry him because he's twice the man you'll ever be," Clara said coldly. "Now get away from my daughter." "She's my daughter too." "She's the daughter of a man who wanted nothing to do with her until it became inconvenient not to," Cole said, standing. He didn't raise his voice, didn't make threats. He simply stood, and his presence was enough to make James step back. "The judge gave you 5 minutes to consult with your lawyer. I suggest you use them." James opened his mouth, closed it, and turned away. Clara watched him huddle with Blackwell in the corner, their conversation sharp and heated. Tommy appeared at Clara's elbow. "That was the bravest damn thing I ever saw," he said admiringly. "Both of you." "Or the stupidest," Clara muttered. "Sometimes they're the same thing," Tommy said with a grin. The 5 minutes passed too quickly. Judge Morrison returned, his expression giving nothing away. James and Blackwell returned to their table, both looking grim. "Mr. Blackwell, has your client reached a decision?" Blackwell stood slowly. "Your Honor, we request a continuance. This new development requires careful legal consideration." "Denied." The judge's voice was flat. "This isn't a chess game, counselor. There's a child's future at stake, and I won't let you drag this out while you search for legal loopholes. Mr. Hardwick has 2 options. He can contest the upcoming marriage and will proceed with the original custody hearing, or he can accept that Miss Whitmore is providing adequate care for his daughter and withdraw his petition." "Your Honor, we need time." "You've had months to decide you wanted this child. Miss Whitmore had 9 months of pregnancy and nearly died in childbirth to bring her into the world. Mr. Bennett just proposed marriage in open court. I'd say the people who've acted decisively have demonstrated more parental fitness than the ones who need to consult lawyers." Judge Morrison leaned forward. "So I'll ask once more. Does Mr. Hardwick wish to contest this marriage and proceed with the custody hearing?" James and Blackwell engaged in furious whispered consultation. Clara held her breath. Emma, as if sensing the tension, began to fuss. Clara rocked her automatically, her eyes never leaving James's face. Finally, James stood. His face was a mask of barely controlled fury, but when he spoke, his voice was carefully neutral. "I withdraw the petition, Your Honor." The words seemed to suck all the air from the room. Clara felt her knees go weak. Withdraw. He was withdrawing. She'd won. "Are you certain, Mr. Hardwick?" the judge pressed. "This is your last opportunity to assert your parental rights." "I'm certain." James's jaw was tight. "Clearly my daughter will be adequately provided for. I see no need to pursue this further. It was a lie, and everyone knew it. James didn't care about Emma's welfare. He cared about his family's reputation, and a prolonged custody battle with a pregnant woman who'd publicly rejected him would only make things worse. Better to withdraw gracefully, pretend he'd done his duty, and let the scandal die. But Clara didn't care about his motives. She cared about the result. "Very well," Judge Morrison said. "The petition is withdrawn. Miss Whitmore retains full custody of the minor child, Emma Whitmore." He looked at Clara and Cole. "As for your engagement, I assume you'll want to formalize that arrangement promptly." "Yes, Your Honor," Cole said. Then I suggest you visit the county clerk this week. Court is adjourned. The gavel fell with a finality that made Clara's eyes sting with sudden tears. It was over. The fight, the fear, the uncertainty, over. Emma was hers. Legally, indisputably hers. James stalked out of the courtroom without a backward glance, Blackwell hurrying after him. The townspeople began to file out, their voices rising in excited gossip. Mrs. Hartley, the boarding house owner who'd turned Clara away, paused to give her a look of such venomous disapproval that Clara almost laughed. Let her disapprove. Let them all disapprove. She had what mattered. Cole touched her elbow gently. We should go. Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. They walked out of the courthouse together, Tommy trailing behind like a protective shadow. Outside, the January sun was bright on the snow, almost painfully brilliant after the dim courtroom. Red was waiting by the wagon, looking uncomfortable. Everything all right? Everything's fine, Cole said. Let's go home. Home. The word settled over Clara like a warm blanket. The ranch was home now, truly, completely home. They rode back in near silence, the only sounds the creak of the wagon and Emma's occasional fussing. Clara's mind was spinning too fast for conversation. Marriage. She was going to marry Cole. Not for love, not for passion, but for security and partnership and mutual respect. It wasn't what she dreamed of as a girl. But dreams, Clara had learned, were luxuries. Reality required different currency. When they reached the ranch, Tommy and Red tactfully disappeared into the barn, claiming work that needed doing. Cole helped Clara down from the wagon, and they stood in the yard, the winter wind cold on their faces. We should talk, Cole said finally. Yes. Clara adjusted Emma's blanket. We should. They went inside. Clara settled Emma in her cradle and made coffee, needing something to do with her hands. Cole sat at the table, his hat in his hands, turning it over and over. I meant what I said in court, he began. This isn't charity. This isn't me rescuing you out of pity. Then what is it? Clara set down 2 cups of coffee and sat across from him. Cole was quiet for a long moment, choosing his words carefully. It's practical. You need security. I need help running this ranch. Together, we can build something solid, something lasting. A business arrangement. A partnership. He met her eyes. I'm not expecting romance, Clara. I'm not asking you to love me. I'm asking you to work beside me. Help me build this ranch into something that matters and raise Emma in a home where she's wanted and safe. And what do you get out of it? Same as you, a partner. Someone who understands hard work and doesn't quit when things get difficult. He paused. And maybe, if I'm honest, an end to being alone. The confession was quiet, unadorned, and completely sincere. Clara understood. She'd been alone too, even in Philadelphia, surrounded by people. Alone with her shame, her fear, her uncertain future. Cole was offering an end to that loneliness, not through passion, but through shared purpose. All right, Clara said slowly, but I need you to understand something. I won't be a wife in the traditional sense. I'll work, I'll keep house, I'll be a partner in every way. But I won't be property. I won't be owned. I wouldn't want you if you were, Cole said simply. I've seen owned women, broken women. You're neither of those things, and I'd never try to make you so. Clara felt something in her chest loosen. Then yes, truly yes, not just for the judge. I'll marry you. Cole nodded once, as if sealing a contract. We'll go to the county clerk tomorrow, make it legal, then we'll figure out the rest as we go. What about the others, Tommy and Red? They'll adjust. Tommy already worships the ground you walk on. Red's coming around. Cole smiled slightly. And if they don't adjust, they can find work elsewhere. This is our ranch now. Ours. Ours. The word carried weight, responsibility, and a promise of permanence Clara hadn't dared hope for. Manashab. That night, lying in bed with Emma sleeping beside her, Clara stared at the ceiling and tried to imagine her future. Mrs. Cole Bennett. A rancher's wife. Not the life she'd planned, but perhaps the life she needed. In the next room, she heard Cole moving about, settling for the night. Soon they'd be married, sharing a home, if not a bed. Building a life together based on mutual respect and shared labor. It wasn't a fairy tale. But fairy tales, Clara thought, were for girls who'd never faced the harsh realities of the world. She was a woman now, a mother, a survivor. She needed something more solid than fantasy. And maybe, just maybe, she'd found it. The wedding took place 3 days later in Judge Morrison's chambers. It was a brief, business-like ceremony with Tommy and the judge's clerk as witnesses. Clara wore her best dress, mended and pressed. Cole wore a clean shirt and his Sunday coat. Emma slept through the entire thing. "Do you, Clara Whitmore, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do." "Do you, Cole Bennett, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." "Then by the power vested in me by Montana Territory, I pronounce you husband and wife." No kiss, no celebration, no rice thrown or bells rung, just signatures on a document and a handshake from the judge. "Congratulations," Judge Morrison said, "and good luck. You're going to need it." They rode back to the ranch as husband and wife, the marriage certificate tucked safely in Cole's coat pocket. Tommy whooped and hollered when they told him, already planning a celebration. Red nodded gruffly and shook Cole's hand. "You did good, boss," he said. Then, to Clara, "You too, ma'am. Both of you." It was the first time Red had called her ma'am without irony. Clara accepted it as the peace offering it was. That evening, after a celebratory dinner of roasted venison and the last of the apple pie, Clara stood at the kitchen window washing dishes. Through the glass, she could see Cole and Tommy in the barn, checking on a mare that was due to foal. Red had already turned in for the night. The house was quiet, except for Emma's soft breathing from her cradle. Clara dried the last dish and hung up the towel, then walked over to look down at her daughter. Emma was growing already, her features losing their newborn blurriness. She had James's dark hair but Clara's nose, and eyes that hadn't quite decided what color they'd be. She was beautiful and perfect, and completely, legally, safely Clara's. "We made it," Clara whispered, touching Emma's soft cheek. "We're home." Outside, the Montana winter stretched endlessly in all directions. But inside, the house was warm and filled with the promise of spring to come. The first weeks of marriage passed in a strange dance of adjustment and routine. Clara and Cole moved around each other with careful courtesy, like guests in the same house rather than husband and wife. He'd given her the larger bedroom, insisting he was comfortable in the smaller room that had once been storage. They took meals together, worked side by side during the day, and retreated to separate spaces at night. It was functional, respectful, and oddly lonely. Clara told herself it was enough. She had security, a home, legal protection for Emma. What more could she ask for? Love was a luxury she'd learned to live without, and passion had brought her nothing but pain. Better this careful partnership than the reckless heartbreak that had driven her west in the first place. But sometimes, late at night, when Emma woke crying and Clara walked the floor soothing her, she'd hear Cole moving in his room and wonder what he was thinking. Whether he regretted his impulsive courthouse proposal. Whether he resented the responsibility he'd taken on. Whether this arrangement was as hollow for him as it sometimes felt for her. February brought a thaw that turned the ranch into a sea of mud. The cattle, restless after months of confinement, broke through a fence and scattered across the north pasture. It took 3 days of brutal work to round them up, and on the third day, disaster struck. Clara was in the kitchen preparing lunch when she heard shouting from the direction of the barn. She ran to the window and saw Tommy sprinting toward the house, his face white with panic. "Mrs. Bennett! Mrs. Bennett! Come quick!" Clara's heart seized. She grabbed her coat and ran outside, Emma still asleep in the house. "What happened?" "It's Cole. Horse threw him in the ravine. He's hurt bad." The world tilted. Clara forced herself to stay calm, to think. "Where is he?" "North pasture, about a mile out. Red's with him, but we need help getting him back." "Hitch the wagon. Bring blankets, rope, and the medical kit from the pantry. Go now." Tommy ran. Clara stood for one frozen moment, terror clawing at her throat, then shoved it down. Cole needed her functional, not hysterical. She checked on Emma, still sleeping peacefully, and scrawled a quick note in case the baby woke. Then she climbed onto the wagon beside Tommy, and they raced toward the north pasture. The ravine was steep and treacherous with mud. Clara could see Red halfway down the slope, crouched beside a dark form. Her stomach clenched. "Cole!" She was climbing down before the wagon fully stopped, sliding in the mud, grabbing at roots and rocks for balance. "Careful!" Red called. "Ground's unstable." Clara reached them and dropped to her knees beside Cole. He was conscious but gray-faced with pain, his left leg bent at an unnatural angle. Blood seeped through his torn pants from a gash on his thigh. "Hey," he said weakly, managing a pained smile. "Guess I found a soft landing." "Don't joke." Claire's hands were already assessing the damage, her mind running through everything she'd read in the medical book. Broken leg, definitely. Possible concussion from the way he winced when she touched his head. The bleeding needed to stop first. "Tommy, bring the medical kit. Red, I need you to help me set this leg before we move him." "You know how to do that?" Red asked doubtfully. "I read about it. That'll have to be enough." Claire's voice was steadier than she felt. She'd delivered Emma with only a book and Cole's help. She could do this. She had to. The next hour was brutal. Clara cleaned and bandaged the gash on Cole's thigh, while Red and Tommy rigged a makeshift stretcher. Then came the worst part, setting the broken leg. Clara had Red hold Cole's shoulders while she pulled the leg straight, feeling the bones grind back into alignment. Cole's scream echoed across the pasture before he passed out from the pain. "Jesus," Tommy whispered, his face green. "Help me splint it," Clara ordered, her hands shaking now that the worst was done. They bound the leg between two boards, wrapped it tight, and carefully maneuvered Cole onto the stretcher. Getting him up the ravine and into the wagon was a nightmare of mud and curses and grinding effort. By the time they had him loaded, all four of them were covered in filth and exhausted. But Cole was still breathing, still alive, and that was what mattered. The ride back to the ranch seemed to take hours. Clara sat in the wagon bed with Cole's head in her lap, monitoring his breathing, checking his pulse. He drifted in and out of consciousness, mumbling things she couldn't quite make out. "Stay with me," she whispered. "Don't you dare leave me to run this ranch alone. That wasn't our deal." His eyes fluttered open briefly. "Bossy," he murmured. Then he was out again. At the ranch, they carried him into the house and settled him in Clara's bed. It was closer to the kitchen and the fire, easier to monitor. Clara sent Tommy to town for the doctor, though she knew it would be hours before he returned. In the meantime, she did what she could, changed his bandages, checked the splint, watched for signs of fever. Emma woke and needed feeding. Clara nursed her with one arm while keeping her other hand on Cole's forehead, checking his temperature. The absurdity of it struck her, sitting between her infant daughter and her injured husband, trying to keep both of them alive through sheer force of will. "This is not how I imagined marriage," she muttered to Emma. The baby just blinked at her solemnly and continued nursing. Doc Warren finally arrived near sunset, a grizzled man with capable hands and kind eyes. He examined Cole thoroughly, grunting occasionally, but saying nothing until he was finished. "You did good work," he told Clara. "Legs set properly, wounds clean. He's got a nasty concussion, and he'll need to stay off that leg for at least 6 weeks, but he should heal." "Should?" Clara seized on the word. "Nothing's certain with injuries this severe. Infection's the biggest risk now. You'll need to watch him close, change those bandages twice daily, keep him still." The doctor pulled out a bottle of laudanum. "This for the pain, small doses only. It's powerful stuff." After the doctor left, Clara sat beside the bed and looked at her husband. He seemed smaller somehow, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. Cole was always the strong one, the steady presence. Seeing him laid low was disorienting. "You can't do this," she told his unconscious form. "You can't make me care about you and then nearly die on me. That's not fair." The words hung in the air, more honest than she'd intended. When had she started caring? When had this arrangement of convenience become something more? She didn't have time to examine the question. The ranch still needed running, Emma still needed care, and Cole needed constant monitoring. Clara fell into a grinding routine. Wake every 2 hours through the night to check on Cole, feed Emma when she cried, snatch sleep when she could, and somehow keep the household functioning during the day. Tommy and Red stepped up without being asked. They took over the heavy ranch work, handling everything Cole normally managed. Red even started checking on Clara each evening, bringing her coffee, and asking gruffly if she needed anything. "I'm fine," Clara insisted on the third night, though she swayed with exhaustion. "You're running yourself into the ground," Red said bluntly. "When's the last time you slept more than an hour straight?" Clara couldn't remember. "Someone needs to watch him." "I'll watch him, you sleep." Red, you've been working all day. And you've been working all day and all night. Red's voice was firm. I'll wake you if anything changes. Now go sleep in the spare room before you fall over. Clara wanted to argue, but exhaustion won. She stumbled to the spare room and collapsed onto the bed, asleep before her head hit the pillow. She woke 4 hours later in a panic, certain something terrible had happened. But when she rushed to Cole's room, she found Red sitting beside the bed, whittling quietly while Cole slept peacefully. Fever broke about an hour ago, Red reported. Breathing's good. He woke once, drank some water, went back to sleep. Clara sagged with relief. Thank you. Don't mention it. Red stood, stretching. He's a good man, the boss. Best I've worked for. Figured I owed him. After Red left, Clara sat in the chair he'd vacated and took Cole's hand. It was warm, no longer burning with fever. His color was better, his breathing even. He was going to be all right. She didn't let go of his hand. Cole woke fully the next morning, groggy but lucid. His eyes found Clara immediately. You look terrible, he croaked. Clara laughed, the sound edged with hysteria. You break your leg and give yourself a concussion, and you're critiquing my appearance? Someone has to. He tried to sit up and winced. How long was I out? 3 days, on and off? The doctor says you need to stay in bed for at least 6 weeks. 6 weeks? The ranch is being managed by Red and Tommy, and me. Clara squeezed his hand. We've got it handled, Cole. You just focus on healing. He studied her face, and something shifted in his expression. You were worried. It wasn't a question. Clara thought about lying, about maintaining the careful emotional distance they'd established, but she was too tired for pretense. Terrified, she admitted. I thought I might lose you. Would that have mattered? His voice was soft, uncertain in a way Cole never was. Clara met his eyes. Yes, it would have mattered very much. The words hung between them, fragile and true. Cole's hand tightened on hers. I'm not going anywhere, he said. Takes more than a ravine to get rid of me. Good. Clara's voice was fierce. Because I'm not done with you yet. Something changed between them in that moment. The careful politeness began to crack, revealing something warmer underneath. They were still partners, still building a practical arrangement, but now there was possibility threaded through it, the chance that this marriage might become more than just survival. The weeks of Cole's recovery were hard but strangely intimate. Clara spent hours sitting with him, talking about everything and nothing. He told her about growing up in Missouri, about his parents' failed farm, and his decision to head west. She told him about Philadelphia, about her mother's boarding house, and the dreams she'd had before James destroyed them. Do you regret it? Cole asked one evening. Coming west? Everything that happened? Clara looked at Emma, asleep in her cradle. I regret trusting the wrong person. I regret the pain, but I can't regret Emma, and I can't regret ending up here. With me? With you, Clara confirmed. This wasn't what I planned, but plans change. Maybe what we have is better than what I planned anyway. Cole reached for her hand, and Clara took it without hesitation. They sat in comfortable silence as the fire crackled and the winter wind howled outside. By mid-March, Cole was hobbling around on crutches, impatient with his body's limitations but healing well. The ranch was showing signs of spring, early grass pushing through melting snow, calves being born, birds returning from winter migration. Clara stood at the kitchen window one morning, watching Cole supervise Tommy and Red from a chair in the yard. He still couldn't do heavy work, but his mind was sharp and his directions clear. The ranch hadn't missed a beat under their combined management. Emma was sitting in a basket on the table, awake and alert, watching everything with wide eyes. She was growing so fast, already starting to smile and coo. Clara's heart squeezed every time she looked at her daughter. We did it, she whispered to Emma. We built something real here. But even as she said it, she felt the first stirrings of unease. They'd survived winter, survived Cole's injury, survived James's legal challenge. Everything should feel secure now. So why did she have the sense that something was still coming? The answer arrived 2 weeks later in the form of a rider from town. Clara saw him coming and went to the door, Emma on her hip. Mrs. Bennett? The rider looked young and nervous. Yes? Message from the telegraph office. Came in this morning. He handed her a folded paper. Clara's hand shook as she opened it. The words were brief and devastating. James Hardwick. Dead, stop, fell from horse. Stop. Family, requesting information regarding child. Stop lawyer to follow, stop. The paper fluttered from Clara's numb fingers. James was dead. The father of her child, the man who'd caused her so much pain and fear, was dead. She should feel something, grief, relief, vindication. Instead, she just felt hollow. Ma'am? You all right? The writer looked concerned. Fine, thank you for bringing this. Clara's voice sounded distant to her own ears. After the writer left, Clara stood in the doorway holding Emma and staring at nothing. James was gone, but his family remained. And if they'd sent a lawyer, it meant they still wanted something. Cole found her there an hour later, still frozen. The telegram crumpled on the floor. Clara? He touched her shoulder gently. What happened? She handed him the telegram without speaking, watched his face as he read it, saw his jaw tighten. When? Was all he asked. 2 weeks ago. According to the date on the telegram, a riding accident. Clara's laugh was bitter. Ironic, considering. Cole crushed the paper in his fist. They're sending a lawyer. That means they're not giving up. James is dead. What could they possibly want now? Emma. Cole's voice was grim. His parents lost their son. Emma's the only piece of him they have left. They'll want her, Clara, not for love, but for legacy. For the Hardwick name to continue. Terror spiked through Clara's numbness. They can't have her. I won't let them. They'll try. Money buys a lot of legal maneuvering. Cole gripped her shoulders. But they'll have to go through both of us now. You're not alone in this anymore. Clara looked at her husband. His steady gray eyes, his determined jaw, his hands gentle on her shoulders. He was right. She wasn't alone. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. What do we do? She asked. We wait for the lawyer. We hear what they have to say, and then we fight like hell to keep our daughter. Our daughter. Not just Clara's, not just Emma's biological father's, theirs. Clara pulled Cole into a fierce embrace. Emma caught between them. I'm scared, she whispered against his shoulder. I know, me too. His arms tightened around both of them. But fear doesn't mean we quit. The lawyer arrived 3 days later, a different man than Blackwell, but cut from the same expensive cloth. His name was Thornton, and he had the cold efficiency of someone used to winning. They met in the ranch house parlor, such as it was. Clara sat on the sofa with Cole beside her, Emma in her arms. Thornton took the chair across from them and opened his leather case with precise movements. First, allow me to express the Hardwick family's condolences on your loss, Mrs. Bennett, he began smoothly. I'm sorry for their loss, Clara said carefully. James was Emma's father. Indeed, which brings me to the purpose of my visit. Thornton pulled out several documents. The Hardwicks are prepared to be extremely generous. They're offering a sum of $5,000 in exchange for custody of the child. The number hung in the air. $5,000 was a fortune, more money than Clara had ever imagined having, enough to secure her future, to never worry about survival again. No, Cole said flatly. Thornton turned to him with a thin smile. Perhaps you should discuss this privately before making such a hasty decision. $5,000 could transform your ranch, Mr. Bennett. Buy new stock, expand your holdings. No amount of money is worth selling a child, Cole interrupted. Emma stays here. That's final. Mrs. Bennett? Thornton addressed Clara directly. Surely you see the value of this offer. The Hardwicks can provide your daughter with education, social standing, every advantage. She has every advantage she needs right here, Clara said, her voice steady despite the rage building in her chest. She has parents who love her, a home, security. What more could she possibly need? The Hardwick name means nothing to me, Clara finished. Emma is a Bennett now. She's our daughter, legally adopted by my husband. Whatever claim the Hardwicks think they have died with James. Thornton's expression hardened. The Hardwicks are prepared to contest the adoption. They have significant legal resources. Then they can waste those resources in court, Cole said. Because we're not giving them Emma. You're making a mistake. Thornton's voice went cold. The Hardwicks always get what they want, Mr. Bennett. Always. If you won't accept their generous offer, They'll pursue other avenues. Legal challenges. Investigations into your fitness as parents. They'll drag your names through the mud until you have nothing left. Let them try. Clara stood, Emma clutched protectively against her chest. I've already lost everything once. I survived it. I'll survive whatever they throw at me, and Emma will still be mine when it's over. Thornton studied them both, perhaps realizing that threats wouldn't work. He changed tactics, his voice softening. Think of the child. Really think. What kind of life can you offer her here? Hard work, isolation, limited prospects. The Hardwicks can give her the world. The world isn't worth much if you get it without love, Clara said quietly. Now I think it's time for you to leave. Thornton packed his documents with sharp, angry movements. At the door, he turned back. This isn't over. The Hardwicks don't give up, and neither do I. Neither do we, Cole said. After Thornton left, Clara sank back onto the sofa, her legs suddenly weak. They're really going to fight us for her. Let them. Cole sat beside her. We'll fight back. We won't lose her, Clara. I promise you that. Clara wanted to believe him, but she'd learned that promises were fragile things, easily broken by people with enough money and determination. That night, long after everyone else had gone to bed, Clara sat in the dark parlor with Emma sleeping in her arms. Through the window, she could see the vast Montana sky filled with more stars than she'd ever imagined existed. The frontier was harsh and unforgiving, but it was also honest. Out here, you earned what you had through work and courage, not money and manipulation. The Hardwicks wanted to buy her daughter like she was property. They wanted to erase everything Clara had built and replace it with their version of respectability. But Emma wasn't for sale. Not for $5,000. Not for all the money in the world. Clara heard footsteps and looked up to find Cole in the doorway, his crutches making soft thuds on the wooden floor. Couldn't sleep either? He asked. Too much thinking. He settled beside her on the sofa, close enough that their shoulders touched. Want to share? I'm thinking about how far I've come, Clara said slowly. 6 months ago, I had nothing. No home, no job, no hope. I was ready to accept whatever scraps the world threw at me. But now, she looked at Emma, then at Cole. Now I have something worth fighting for. And I'm not the same woman who stepped off that stagecoach. No, Cole agreed. You're stronger, braver, more sure of yourself. We both are. Clara leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling him stiffen in surprise, then relax. We've built something real here, Cole. Not just a marriage of convenience, but a real partnership, a real family. His arm came around her shoulders, pulling her closer. Yeah, we have. They sat in comfortable silence, Emma sleeping peacefully between them, and Clara felt something settle in her chest. Whatever came next, legal battles, social condemnation, financial struggle, they'd face it together. The Hardwicks had money and lawyers and social standing, but Clara and Cole had something stronger, the unshakable knowledge that Emma belonged with them, and the willingness to fight for that truth with everything they had. Let the Hardwicks come with their threats and their money. They'd find that buying a child from desperate parents was one thing. Taking her from parents who'd already lost everything and come out stronger was something else entirely. Clara kissed Emma's soft head and felt Cole's arm tighten around her. Whatever tomorrow brought, they were ready. The legal papers arrived on a morning when spring had finally broken through winter's grip. Clara was hanging laundry in the yard, Emma gurgling happily in a basket at her feet, when she saw the official courier riding up the dusty road. Her hand stilled on the wet sheet she'd been pinning to the line. Cole emerged from the barn, his limp still pronounced but the crutches abandoned weeks ago. He reached the courier first, signed for the envelope, and held it like it might explode. Clara walked over slowly, wiping her hands on her apron. It's from the territorial court, Cole said, tearing it open. His eyes scanned the dense legal text, his expression growing darker with each line. They're filing for custody based on the best interests of the child, claiming that as the paternal grandparents, they have superior rights to an adoptive father with no blood relation. He looked up at Clara. They're also questioning the legitimacy of our marriage, calling it a fraud designed to circumvent James's parental rights. Clara felt the world tilt. But James withdrew his petition. Judge Morrison witnessed it. And then he died before the adoption was finalized. Cole's voice was grim. Thornton's arguing that James's death invalidates his withdrawal, that his right should pass to his parents as next of kin. That's insane. That's not how any of this works. It's how it works when you have enough money to hire lawyers who specialize in finding loopholes. Cole folded the papers with sharp, angry movements. The hearing is set for 3 weeks from now. They're not wasting time. Clara picked up Emma, holding her close. 3 weeks. They had 3 weeks to mount a defense against people with unlimited resources and generational wealth. 3 weeks before Emma's entire future hung in the balance again. "We need a lawyer," she said. "A real one. We can't fight this alone." Cole nodded. "I'll write to Helena tomorrow. There's a lawyer there, Marcus Webb. He handles cases against big money interests. If anyone can help us, it's him." That night, Clara lay awake long after Cole had gone to his room. Through the thin walls, she could hear him pacing, his footsteps uneven from the lingering injury. Neither of them could rest. The Hardwicks had declared war, and this time they had the law on their side. The next morning, Cole left before dawn. Clara threw herself into ranch work, needing the physical exhaustion to quiet her racing mind. She mucked stalls, repaired fence, helped Tommy birth a difficult calf. Anything to avoid thinking about courtrooms and custody battles and the very real possibility of losing Emma. Red found her in the barn at noon, covered in sweat and hay, working with manic intensity. "You're going to hurt yourself," he said, taking the pitchfork from her hands. "Boss wouldn't want you working yourself to death while he's gone." Clara sagged against the stall door. "I can't just sit around waiting. I'll lose my mind." "Then don't sit around, but don't kill yourself either." Red's gruff voice held unexpected gentleness. "That baby needs her mama in one piece." The simple truth of it broke through Clara's frenzy. She nodded, wiping her face with a dirty hand. "You're right. I'm sorry." "Don't apologize. Just take a breath." Red shifted uncomfortably, clearly unused to emotional conversations. "Look, I know I wasn't exactly welcoming when you first got here. Said some things I shouldn't have." "Red, you don't have to." "Yeah, I do." He met her eyes squarely. "You're the best thing that's happened to this ranch in years. You and that baby both. And if some fancy lawyer thinks he can take her away, he's going to have to go through all of us. Not just the boss. All of us." Clara felt tears sting her eyes. "Thank you." Red nodded once and walked away, leaving Clara alone with the realization that somewhere along the way she'd stopped being an outsider. This ranch, these men, this harsh and beautiful land, they were hers now. And she was theirs. Cole returned 2 days later with Marcus Webb in tow. Webb was nothing like Thornton or Blackwell. He was a rumpled man in his 40s with ink-stained fingers and intelligent eyes that missed nothing. He listened to their story without interruption, taking notes in a small leather book. "The Hardwicks are playing a dangerous game," he said finally. "Their legal argument is thin but not impossible. Montana courts do tend to favor blood relations, especially when money and status are involved. But they're making a critical error." "What's that?" Clara asked. "They're treating this like a property dispute instead of a custody case. They keep talking about their rights, their legacy, what they're owed. But family law isn't about what adults are owed. It's about what's best for the child." Webb leaned forward. "We need to make Emma real to the judge. Not a symbol of the Hardwick legacy or a legal chess piece, but a living child who has thrived under your care. We need witnesses who can speak to her welfare, to the home you've built, to your fitness as parents." "We have witnesses," Cole said. "The whole town saw us in court before. And half of them still think Clara's a fallen woman," Webb said bluntly. "We need more than character witnesses. We need evidence that removing Emma from your care would actively harm her. That's a much higher legal bar for the Hardwicks to clear." Over the next weeks, Webb worked tirelessly building their case. He interviewed Tommy and Red, got statements from Doc Warren about Emma's excellent health, even convinced Mrs. Chen, the midwife, to testify about Clara's dedication during the pregnancy. He documented every aspect of Emma's life, her growth, her happiness, the secure home Clara and Cole had built. But the Hardwicks had been busy too. They'd hired investigators who dug into every corner of Clara's past. The night before the hearing, Webb arrived at the ranch with his expression grave. "They have witnesses," he said without preamble. "People from Philadelphia who will testify about your relationship with James. They're going to paint you as a seductress who trapped their son, then fled west to avoid consequences." Clara felt sick. That's not what happened. I know, but they'll make it sound plausible. They've also found people in Redemption Falls willing to testify about your arrival, how you were visibly pregnant and unmarried, how you were turned away from respectable boarding houses. They're building a narrative that you're morally unfit. And Cole? Clara's voice was barely a whisper. Webb looked at Cole. They're arguing your marriage was a sham, that you proposed in court purely to thwart their custody claim. They'll say you barely knew Clara, that you rushed into marriage without proper consideration, that the whole thing is a fraud. It wasn't a fraud, Cole said quietly. Can you prove that? Webb asked. Can you stand in front of a judge and convince him that your feelings for Clara are genuine? Because that's what it's going to take. Clara and Cole looked at each other across the table. In the months since their courthouse wedding, something had shifted between them. The careful distance had eroded, replaced by genuine partnership, respect, even affection. But love? Could they claim love when their marriage had started as pure strategy? I can prove it, Cole said, still holding Clara's gaze. Because it's true. The courtroom was packed when they arrived the next morning. The Hardwicks sat at the plaintiff's table, James's parents, Frederick and Victoria, dressed in mourning black that somehow managed to look expensive rather than somber. Victoria Hardwick's face was set in lines of aristocratic grief. Frederick looked cold and determined. Judge Morrison presided again, his expression carefully neutral. Clara took her seat beside Cole and Webb, Emma in her arms. The baby was calm, playing with a small wooden rattle Red had carved, completely unaware that her entire future was being decided. Thornton opened with exactly the attack Webb had predicted. He painted Clara as a calculating woman who'd used pregnancy to trap James, then fled when she couldn't secure marriage. He presented testimony from Philadelphia society women who described Clara as pushy and inappropriate, always angling for advancement beyond her station. The evidence shows a pattern of manipulation, Thornton said smoothly. When James Hardwick honorably attempted to make amends by offering marriage, Miss Whitmore, or Mrs. Bennet, as she now styles herself, refused. Not out of principle, but because she'd already ensnared another man. A man of property who could provide for her without requiring her to return to Philadelphia and face the consequences of her actions. Clara's fingernails dug into her palms. Every word was a twisted version of the truth, lies built on fragments of fact. Thornton called witness after witness, the boarding house owners from Redemption Falls who'd turned Clara away. A woman from Philadelphia who swore James had been heartbroken when Clara left. Each testimony painted Clara as mercenary, Cole as duped, and their marriage as fraudulent. Finally, Victoria Hardwick took the stand. She dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, the picture of grieving grandmother. "We only want what's best for our granddaughter," she said, her voice trembling perfectly. "James was our only child. That baby is all we have left of him. We can give her everything, the finest education, entry into the best society, a life of comfort and opportunity. All we ask is the chance to raise her as James would have wanted." "And what do you believe James would have wanted?" Thornton prompted. "For his daughter to bear his name with pride, to take her rightful place in the Hardwick family, to never know the shame of illegitimacy or poverty." Victoria looked directly at Clara. "We don't blame Miss Whitmore for her circumstances, but surely she can see that love means putting the child's needs above her own desires." It was a masterful performance. Clara watched several people in the gallery nod in agreement. Even Judge Morrison's expression had softened slightly. Webb stood for cross-examination. "Mrs. Hardwick, when did you learn of Emma's existence?" "Shortly before my son's death. He'd been searching for Clara for months." "And before that? When Clara was pregnant and desperate? When she came to your home asking for help?" Victoria's mouth tightened. "We were not aware of her condition at that time." "Really? Because we have a statement from your housekeeper that Clara visited your home 7 months pregnant, that she spoke with you directly, and that you paid her $500 to leave Philadelphia and never contact your family again." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Victoria's composure cracked. "That's a lie." "We have the bank draft," Webb said calmly, "signed by you, made out to Clara Whitmore, dated November 3rd, the same day Clara purchased her stagecoach ticket west." He held up the document. "You paid her to disappear, Mrs. Hardwick, and now that your son is dead and can't contradict your version of events, You've decided you want the child you tried to erase. Objection! Thornton was on his feet. Counsel is twisting. Overruled, Judge Morrison said sharply. I want to hear this. Mrs. Hardwick, did you or did you not pay Clara Whitmore to leave Philadelphia? Victoria looked at her husband, then at Thornton. Finally, she lifted her chin. I gave her money, yes, for the child's welfare, to help her start fresh somewhere she wouldn't be persecuted for her condition. And you demanded she never contact your family again? We thought it best for everyone. Best for everyone or best for the Hardwick reputation? Webb's voice was cutting. You didn't want the scandal of an illegitimate grandchild. But now that James is dead and the scandal will come out anyway, you've decided to claim Emma. Not out of love, but because she's a Hardwick, and Hardwicks always get what they want. Isn't that right? How dare you? Isn't that exactly what your lawyer threatened Clara with? Webb pulled out another document. That the Hardwicks always get what they want? That you'd destroy her if she didn't comply? Victoria's face flushed red. She had no answer. Webb turned to the judge. Your Honor, the Hardwicks claim they want what's best for Emma, but their actions tell a different story. They rejected her when she was inconvenient. They paid her mother to disappear. They only wanted her after James died, and she became useful to their legacy. That's not love. That's ownership. He called Clara to the stand next. She handed Emma to Cole and walked forward on shaking legs, acutely aware of every eye in the courtroom. Webb's questions were gentle, letting her tell her story in her own words. How she'd loved James and believed his promises. How his family had rejected her. How she'd arrived in Redemption Falls with nothing and built a life through sheer determination. How Cole had offered her work, then friendship, then partnership. Do you love your husband, Mrs. Bennett? Webb asked. Clara looked at Cole, holding Emma in his arms, and felt her heart clench. When had it happened? When had partnership become something deeper? Yes, she said clearly. I love him very much. And he loves you? Yes. This isn't a marriage of convenience, then? It started that way, Clara admitted. Cole proposed in court to help me keep Emma. But somewhere along the way, it became real. We became a family, not because of legal documents or courtroom strategy, but because we chose each other every single day. Thornton's cross-examination was brutal. He hammered at the timeline of their relationship, tried to make Clara admit she'd manipulated Cole, questioned every decision she'd made. But Clara held firm, answering each attack with quiet honesty. Finally, Cole took the stand. Webb established his background, his character, his reputation in the community. Then came the critical question. Mr. Bennett, why did you propose to Clara Whitmore? To protect her, Cole said simply. And Emma, they needed help, and I was in a position to give it. So it was charity? At first, maybe, but Clara doesn't accept charity. She earns everything she gets. Within weeks of arriving at my ranch, she'd made herself indispensable, not just as a worker, but as a partner. She saw what needed doing and did it. No complaints, no excuses. When did you realize you loved her? Cole was quiet for a moment. The night Emma was born. Clara was in labor for hours, and I'd never seen anyone so strong, so determined. She refused to give up even when the pain was unbearable. And when Emma finally came, when Clara held her daughter for the first time, I saw something I'd never seen before. Pure love. Fierce and unconditional and absolutely fearless. He looked at Clara. That's when I knew. I didn't just respect her, I loved her, and I wanted to spend the rest of my life with someone that brave. Clara felt tears streaming down her face. Across the courtroom, she saw several women dabbing at their eyes. Thornton tried to shake Cole's testimony, but nothing worked. Cole's answers were steady, honest, unshakable. He loved Clara. He loved Emma. They were his family, and no amount of legal maneuvering would change that. The final witness was Emma herself, in a way. Webb had Doc Warren testify about her perfect health, her appropriate development, the clear evidence of attentive care. Then he had the judge's clerk bring in photographs Webb had commissioned. Emma smiling in Clara's arms, Emma being held by Cole, Emma sleeping peacefully in her cradle at the ranch. This is what the Hardwicks want to destroy, Webb said, holding up the photographs. A happy, healthy child being raised by parents who love her. Yes, those parents started their relationship unconventionally. Yes, they've faced hardship. But look at Emma. Does she look neglected, unloved, harmed in any way? He set the photographs on the judge's bench. The Hardwicks offer money and status. The Bennetts offer love and family. Your Honor, I ask you to consider which of those things truly serves Emma's best interests. Judge Morrison called a recess to consider his decision. Clara and Cole waited in an anteroom, Emma between them, while the minutes crawled past. Tommy and Red had come to wait with them, along with Doc Warren and Mrs. Chen and even a few townspeople who'd decided Clara deserved support. Whatever happens, Cole said quietly, his hand finding Clara's, we're in this together. Clara squeezed his hand. Together. After an hour, they were called back. Judge Morrison looked exhausted, the weight of his decision visible in every line of his face. I've reviewed all the evidence and testimony, he began. This is an extraordinarily difficult case. On one hand, we have the Hardwicks, the child's biological grandparents, people of means and standing who can provide material advantages. On the other, we have the Bennetts, adoptive parents who've demonstrated genuine care and devotion despite their shorter relationship with the child. Clara's heart hammered. She couldn't breathe. The law in these matters is meant to serve the child's best interests, the judge continued, not the interests of the adults involved. I've had to ask myself a difficult question. What does Emma need, money and status, or love and security? He paused, looking at Emma in Clara's arms. The answer, I believe, is clear. Emma needs parents who want her for herself, not for what she represents. She needs a home built on genuine affection, not obligation or legacy. She needs the life the Bennetts are providing. Clara's breath caught. Could he possibly be saying, furthermore, I find the Hardwicks' actions prior to James's death to be deeply troubling. They paid Clara to leave, rejected their grandchild when it was inconvenient, and only sought custody when it served their purposes. That is not the behavior of people acting in a child's best interests. Judge Morrison's gavel came down with finality. Custody is awarded to Cole and Clara Bennett. The Hardwick petition is denied. Emma Bennett will remain with her legal parents. The courtroom erupted. Victoria Hardwick was shouting something. Thornton was objecting, but it didn't matter. Clara pulled Emma close and sobbed into Cole's shoulder while he held them both, his own face wet with tears. They'd won. Emma was theirs, truly, completely, finally theirs. Outside the courthouse, the spring sunshine felt like benediction. Tommy whooped and spun Clara around until she was dizzy with laughter. Red clapped Cole on the shoulder hard enough to make him stumble. Mrs. Chen pressed a basket of food into Clara's hands, and Doc Warren promised to check on Emma for free whenever they needed. The Hardwicks left without a word, climbing into their expensive carriage and disappearing down the road back east. Clara watched them go and felt nothing but relief. That chapter was closed. Emma would never know the coldness of people who valued legacy over love. The ride back to the ranch was jubilant. Tommy drove the wagon while Cole and Clara sat in the back with Emma between them, pointing out landmarks to their daughter as if she could understand. That's where I first saw your mama, Cole said, indicating the bench outside the general store. She looked like she'd fight the whole world if she had to. Still would, Clara said with a smile. I know, it's one of the things I love about you. Clara turned to look at him. You really meant what you said in court? About when you knew? Every word. Cole's gray eyes were serious. I love you, Clara. Not because I have to, not out of obligation, because you're the strongest, bravest, most stubborn woman I've ever met, because you make me want to be better, because I can't imagine my life without you and Emma in it. Clara kissed him then, right there in the back of the wagon, with Tommy pretending not to watch, and the whole Montana sky spread out above them. It was their first real kiss, and it tasted like freedom and promise and home. I love you too, she whispered against his lips. I think I have for a while now. I was just too scared to admit it. Not scared anymore? Clara looked at Emma, then at the ranch coming into view on the horizon. No, not anymore. The years that followed were hard in the way all frontier life was hard. Long winters, difficult summers, the constant struggle to make the land yield enough to survive. But they were good years too. The ranch grew and prospered under Clara and Cole's partnership. They added more cattle, improved the buildings, even hired 2 more hands to help with the expanding operation. Emma grew from infant to toddler to a wild-haired little girl who could ride a horse almost before she could walk. She had Claire's determination and Cole's steady nature, and she was loved with a fierceness that never dimmed. When Emma was 3, Clara gave birth to a son they named William. 2 years later came another daughter, Sarah. The small ranch house rang with children's laughter, with the sounds of a family being built from choice and work and stubborn love. Tommy eventually left to start his own ranch, but he visited often, became Uncle Tommy to the children. Red stayed on and became the most loyal foreman a ranch could ask for, gruff and devoted in equal measure. He carved toys for each of the children and taught them to ride, though he'd never admit how much he loved them. Redemption Falls slowly changed its opinion of the Bennetts. Claire's determination and Cole's integrity gradually won over even the most stubborn gossips. When the school board needed a new teacher, they asked Clara. When the town council needed advice on ranch management, they consulted Cole. Respectability, it turned out, could be earned through actions rather than birth. On Emma's 10th birthday, Clara stood in the doorway watching her daughter race across the pasture on her pony, William and Sarah cheering from the fence. Cole came up behind her, sliding his arms around her waist. "Happy?" he asked. Clara leaned back against him. "Happier than I ever imagined possible." "No regrets?" She thought about the question seriously. Regrets about James, about the pain, about the hard road that had brought her here? Maybe. But regrets about where she'd ended up? "Not a single one," she said firmly. That night, after the children were in bed, Clara and Cole sat on the porch watching the stars emerge. The same stars that had watched over her that first terrible night in Redemption Falls, when she'd had nothing but a carpet bag and a baby in her belly, and the desperate hope that somewhere there was a place for her. She'd found that place, not by accepting what others said she deserved, not by bowing to society's judgment, but by standing firm and demanding the life she wanted on her own terms. "What are you thinking about?" Cole asked. "About that first day, when you offered me work. Best decision I ever made. I thought you were crazy, or dangerous, or both." Cole laughed. "Maybe I was a little crazy, taking on a pregnant woman with no ranching experience and half the town ready to burn me in effigy for it." "Why did you do it, really?" "I told you, because of Emma, my sister." Cole was quiet for a moment. "But also because you looked at that whole town judging you, and you didn't flinch. You just lifted your chin and dared them to try you. I thought anyone with that much courage deserved a chance." Clara took his hand. "You gave me more than a chance. You gave me a life, a family, a future." "We gave each other those things," Cole corrected. "I was just existing before you came, going through the motions. You made this ranch a home." They sat in comfortable silence as night deepened around them. Somewhere in the darkness, an owl called. In the house behind them, one of the children stirred and settled again. The ranch slept, secure in the knowledge that tomorrow would bring the same hard work, the same stubborn love, the same slow building of something that mattered. Clara thought about Emma, asleep in her bed with no idea of the battles that had been fought to keep her safe. Someday, when she was old enough, Clara would tell her the whole story, would explain that she'd been born into scandal but raised in love, that she'd been wanted fiercely and protected absolutely, that every breath she took was proof that courage mattered more than reputation. But for now, it was enough that Emma was safe and happy and home. That the girl who would grow into a strong woman knew nothing of shame, only of being cherished. "Cole," Clara said softly. "Thank you for seeing me that day. For really seeing me when everyone else was looking right through me." Cole pulled her close. "Thank you for staying, for choosing this life, for choosing me." "I'd choose you again," Clara said. 1,000 times over, I'd choose you. And she meant it. This life, hard and honest and built from nothing, was hers. The woman who'd stepped off that stagecoach scared, and alone wouldn't recognize the person Clara had become. Strong, confident, loved, and loving in return. The frontier had a way of stripping people down to their essentials, burning away everything false until only truth remained. Clara's truth was simple. She was a mother, a wife, a rancher, a survivor. She was a woman who'd faced the worst the world could throw at her, and emerged not just intact, but triumphant. And most importantly, she was home. Finally, completely, irrevocably home. The stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to human struggles and victories. But on a small ranch in Montana Territory, under that vast sky, a family slept peacefully. A family built not by blood or obligation, but by choice and courage and stubborn, defiant love. And that, Clara knew, was the only legacy that truly mattered. Sonnet 4.5.